Hey guys, welcome back. This is Stamina for Life, and I am Tammy Conway.
And I'm Stephen Conway.
And today we are talking about
communication.
Oh yes.
Yeah, this is an extremely important topic in our list of topics that we've been presenting. Now, you may think communication, I know how to talk. Maybe you even speak more than one language or sign language. We're not saying that you don't know how to communicate. That's not what we are assuming with this topic. Rather, what we're suggesting is that many of us know more about communication than we actually are experts at communicating or how to communicate.
Yeah. So would you say that basically what we're looking towards is effective communication? Because everybody communicates.
Right. That's right. Effective and healthy.
Yes.
I could be cursing you out effectively, but that wouldn't necessarily be healthy.
Right.
Especially for our marriage relationship.
Yes.
And so we're talking about healthy, effective, mature communication.
Now, you've heard us talk about in previous videos about your beginnings, the homes that you grow up in, and the cultures that you develop, because every home has a culture, and within that culture is a culture of communication. Would you agree?
Yes, absolutely.
And so, for us, when we talk about ourselves and our upbringing, we definitely had homes that communication was interesting, to say the least. And that communication, when we came together in our marriage, showed up.
Absolutely.
And how we would talk to one another.
Absolutely. So this variety of communication styles is what comes to the surface in our marriage, because what's normal to one is not normal to the other. We told you the story already about how in her home, shut up was used playfully, but in my home, it wasn't. And so you have this
clash.
So understanding that difference, understanding that when you're married, you're creating a new normal.
Yes.
That's extremely important to being on the path to healthy communications.
One of the things that I think that for me was very eye-opening learning about communication was the that we actually communicate even when we're not actually using words.
Now, this it wasn't a surprise, because I think we all know that we can communicate without using words or nonverbal communication. However, it seems sometimes we forget that we're communicating. Like when somebody says something and you don't like it and you twist your face, but you're unconscious that you twisted your face. Right? You're not thinking about it. It's so spontaneous. And the other person says, what's wrong with you? And you're like, oh, nothing. As though you forgot what you just did. But the reality is that you weren't conscious. But other than what we do with our faces, what are some of the other nonverbal communicators?
Posture is definitely a big communicator. Sitting like this with your arms crossed, or twiddling your fingers. When is this gonna be over? Those types of things are definitely communicating something.
So we can use words to communicate. Our facial expressions. Body language. Grunts, sighs,
what about this
and all
one?
of that.
This is another one.
Right? Rolling your eyes and so forth. All of that falls under that category of body language. Now, we've already talked about core fears, but one of the things that we love about the core fear test is that it helps us to develop a language or vocabulary where we're able to clearly communicate what we're feeling. Because if we're honest, one of the challenges about communicating is oftentimes we feel something, but we're not able to articulate or express precisely what it is.
It's so true. And I think that and we've talked about this again in previous videos. We're going to use it again, the example of anger, right? We have told people before that anger is not the primary emotion. It is the
secondary.
Right. The primary one tends to lie up underneath, and the one that is always or at least the one that we find that's more intricately attached to anger is the button of fear. And being able to put a word to that And fear is so broad, right? And when you take the core fear test, one of the things I love about it is that it takes you through definitions, right? There are words that mean something to you, but don't necessarily mean the same to me. There are things that are attached to words. And I think it's so important for us to understand that the definition of words are so important. And also being able to develop an emotional vocabulary is detrimental to being able to have effective communication.
Now, someone might be asking, like, what is the importance of what we're talking about? Yeah. There was a movie that was out when I was a little boy, and it was called Look Who's Talking, right? And in this movie, what it did is it gave infants, 7, 8, 9-month-old infants, it gave them the ability to be able to articulate themselves like adults. And so infants were able to say everything that they wanted to say.
Wow.
Now, in reality, that's not the case. Yeah. And infants tend to cry. Yeah. They tend to do anything that they can. Why? And this is getting to the importance of this. When you can't articulate what it is that you want to, then you cannot be understood. And the people you're in a relationship or in community with, they cannot give you what it is you need, do for you what it is that you need. And that ends up having us feel frustrated.
Yes.
Extremely frustrated. And how many marriage relationships or family relationships or church relationships, they end up in the area of extreme frustration. Yeah. And we really don't know why it is that we're so frustrated with, my wife or my husband or my son or my daughter or my mother or my father or so forth and so on. But we believe that one of the reasons why this frustration takes place is because we're not able to express what it is rightly and effectively and in a healthy way, what it is we need. And therefore, people are not able to understand us. And that makes the whole relationship thing, not only does it make us frustrating, but sometimes it causes relationships to...
Causes a clash.
Yeah. Now, apart from the frustrating aspect, another reason why what we're explaining today is extremely important is because even though we're not able to articulate what it is that we're feeling, and people are not able to understand us, there is actually a lot of communication that's taking place. But the communication is not between us and the other individual. Now remember, there's a gap. There's a bridge between me and the feelings that I'm having and not being able to articulate those feelings. And then the other person, of course, not listening to me articulate because I can't understand what I'm feeling. And them not being able to understand me. And so when this bridge takes place and real healthy communication is not able to transpire, what is happening?
There's always something happening up here. And I know for myself, that's something that for years, battling with self-talk, this thing called self-talk. In fact, the Bible talks about it. It says this, Proverbs 23:7 says, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. And when we say heart, guys, we're talking about our minds, right? And our thoughts are very powerful. Not only are they're powerful, they impact how we are receiving communication and even how we give it. So we want to take a moment to show you a little skit. Just sit back, take a look, and see have you been here, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit more about self-talk. Hey, you guys hungry?
Yeah, I can eat.
Israel?
Yeah.
You hungry?
Yeah.
Okay. I think we should stop and go ahead and get something to eat on our way.
So what do you want to eat, Tamara?
Oh, it don't matter to me. Eat whatever.
Well, there's a lot of choices. There's Mediterranean, Thai, Chinese, Mexican, some burger joints. Like, what do you want?
It don't matter. Whatever you choose is fine.
All right. Well, at the next exit right here, there's a Taco Bell, so I'm gonna stop there.
Taco Bell? Ugh. We had that yesterday.
Did you not just say you didn't care?
I don't care, but just not that.
Well, you saying you don't want Taco Bell is you care. So which is it? You don't care, or what?
I don't really care, but I just don't care to eat Taco Bell. Okay, like we've had that.
I'm through with you. I'm not choosing anything. It's on you.
Oh goodness. All right, so I'm sure maybe some of you could.
You've been there. Been there, done that.
With that process, let me read something to you. This is 1 Peter 1:13. It says, gird up the loins of your minds. Keep your minds, our thoughts in check. And then Philippians 4:8 says, finally, brethren and sisterin, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of a good report. If there be any virtue, y'all, if there be any praise, please think on these things.
Yeah, and that's
my version.
that's such a powerful concept because, again, with that bridge that exists, because I can't tell you what I feel. Just imagine I'm an infant that, and I can't say what it is that I'm feeling, and you're not able to understand, and you're kind of like, what is it you need from me? When that doesn't happen, what I begin to do and what we begin to do is we begin to tell ourselves the reason that she's not doing or the reason he's not is because of.
Yeah.
And yet the Bible says, whatsoever things are true. I don't know why you are choosing this or that.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know what the reasons are behind a particular thing that's transpiring in our communication. And since we don't know, it is wise for us not to get involved so much so with this thing called self-talk. Yeah. But Tamara, you use another, there's something else that you do to help you to kind of gird up the loins of your minds or to put in check your thoughts, because our thoughts can run wild on us, telling us about what everybody's thinking and why everybody's doing whatever they're doing.
One of the things that I've been doing for years is journaling. And journaling has been so helpful for me to be able to process my thoughts. One of the reasons why is because I really believe that we need to get the things that are in our brains, rather than sending them out of our mouths to another person. We need to get them out, but we need to get them out on maybe a piece of paper, right? Maybe you can even record yourself. If you don't write and it's not something that comes, I love writing, if you got a recorder, you can record yourself, but get the thoughts out of your brain onto something. And one of the things I love to do is once I've written my thoughts down on a piece of paper or in my journal, I love to go back and read it. Maybe not right away, because in that moment I'm in my feelings, but maybe a day or two or a week later, I'll go back and look at those thoughts that I've had, and I'm able to evaluate them based on what we just read from Philippians, right? And man, you know what? I can't tell you how many times I've looked back at those thoughts and felt like, oh, you were tripping.
Yeah, so when you say you were evaluated according to Philippians, you ask yourself, is this true?
Yes.
Was this true?
Yeah.
Is this really what this person was saying
or doing?
Or am I at liberty? Do I have the ability even to be able to know why this person did this, that, or the other? And
the truth is, the experiences are real, right? I don't always walk away from those experiences after I've journaled thinking that I'm wrong, right? There are times when the experience happened, but what it allows me to do is it allows me to be able to go back so I can articulate, right? This is not how I want to say that. This is not because we are also responsible in the area of communication, not just about how it's received when someone is talking to us, but how we talk to others, know? And so I need to be able to see and make sure that when I actually do go and express my thoughts and feelings to someone, that it's done in the proper way. So I look at certain things, I'm like, I don't want to say it that way. Or, yep, that's exactly what I would like to say, Yeah,
and hopefully through this process of journaling, we come to the place where we have a very all-important checkpoint. And at this checkpoint, it is, I'm thinking this, I'm telling myself this is what's happening, but I don't want to say this right now.
Yes.
I want to be able to think about this, reflect on this before I say something that I'm going to regret, say something that's going to wound the other person or whatnot.
And it prevents it from just, what happens when you keep stuff in, it just makes you bitter. It makes you angry and frustrated. That's what I love about journaling. Get that stuff out so that I can move about with my day. So I'm not treating you because someone at work was upset with me, or I had an experience with the neighbor, or I'm not mistreating the kids because I have these other things going on in my mind. And what ends up happening is they spill out into our communication with other people. And have you ever experienced that, where you're talking to someone, they're just like, where in the world did this come from? Mm-hmm. And it has nothing to do with the communication that we're having. And so it's really a good exercise.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, you and I, Tamara, we're also huge proponents. Obviously, if you're watching this series of videos, you will know that we're huge proponents of getting counseling.
Yes.
And one of the reasons why we feel like that's so important is because generally, now when we talk about counseling, because you can get counseling from anybody. You can pull up to somebody on the side of the road and say, hey, what do you think about this? And that would, on some weird planet, that would fall under the category of counsel. But many of us, we turn to the people who are closest to us to give us counsel. In the context of a marriage, we don't suggest, in fact, we counsel against, especially going to your parents.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's a no-no. In fact, if you've already completed your list of expectations, you need to pull it out and you need to write that on there. Don't go to mom and dad, brother and sister, family members. And the reason why is it's obvious. We've stated some of the reasons in previous videos, but also when our parents give us counsel and we don't respond, generally, and this is not all parents, and so don't take this as, my parents are exempt. I can go and talk to them about my spouse. We're not saying this is absolutely every parent, but most parents, when we don't listen to their counsel, the way that they speak to us changes. What they say to us doesn't change, but how they speak to us changes. And that can escalate a conversation, which can turn into an argument, which turns into, you don't listen, you don't know what you're talking about.
And and I know there are some people who will watch this and say, man, I don't think that sounds right. Shouldn't we be able to go to our parents? We're not saying not to talk to your parents, right? God gives us parents, and hopefully you have godly parents who are going to steer you in the right direction. And even if you don't necessarily have what we consider to be the most godly or best of parents, there's still wisdom, right, in the multitude of counsel. What we're really talking about is making sure that you guard your marriage, right? And guarding your marriage is important, and counseling is important. One of the things we have to remember is that our parents are human, and we're their children. They love us. They want us to, be successful and to be happy. And it can be very dangerous if I am in a situation where my spouse and you and I are disagreeing about something, and I'm constantly going to my parents. What you're actually...
Whose side are they going to take?
Exactly. Now you may say, no, that's not true. No, 9 times out of 10, they may try their best, but they're human, right? And it is second nature to want your child to be okay. And so I think that what we do oftentimes when it comes to that is we do a disservice to our relationships when we put our parents in the middle, right? And we also do a disservice to our spouse, because guess what? Next week I will be over it and we will be past it, but my parents are left with the ideas and the thoughts running, self-talk, right. In their brains about who you are or who I am. And, years down the line, we're okay. But they're still thinking about the problems and the issues that we brought to them in regards to our relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the Bible also says, for this cause shall a man leave his father and his mother and shall cleave to his wife. That whole leave and cleave thing is in play here. And what scripture we believe is suggesting is that now we have to be able to navigate and work through life's issues together, right? Because this is, we are a part of an extended family unit, but this is the formation of another family unit.
Yes.
And we've also talked about this. Everything from mom and dad isn't perfect.
Yeah.
And everything from mom and dad isn't perfect. What we want to do by God's grace is take the best of those things.
Yes.
And we want to have a formation of a new thing. And also, it's going to build your trust and your confidence in one another.
Yes.
Problem solving is a huge opportunity for couples to develop trust and to grow together. Yeah. But if you are never solving your challenges together, if you always run into one of the other's parents in order to deal with your issues, then your confidence is going to be in your parents and not in one another by God's grace.
So it helps you to build a muscle, right? Helps you build that muscle, and you will get there. You will get there, and you'll find that rhythm.
When we broach the subject of communication, we generally think about what comes out of our mouths and being able to rightly articulate ourselves, or saying it nicely, or any number of things like that. But actually, one of the most profound or important aspects of communication is not just what comes out of our mouths, but it is
how we listen.
It's how we listen. Yes. And that is, I would say, in today's day and age, it's probably more important than it's ever been. And the reason is because there are so many distractions. And quite frankly, we have not been taught, that is most of us, how to listen in a, in an effective way.
One of the things that we often talk about as well when it comes to listening is how, it's important to be able to evaluate the techniques that we use, correct? And there are some things that prevent us from actually listening, believe it or not. One of those things actually is this thing called filters. So filters, for some of you may think like, oh, filters, something you put on you change it in your vehicle, or air filter.
Let me say something about that. The filter doesn't stop us from listening, but it guides what we hear.
Absolutely.
It guides, and it dramatically affects what we hear, or the way we hear.
Right. I like to use the example of driving on the highway, right? And what if your windshield wipers stop working in the middle of a storm? We've been there before. And you're trying to see, you're driving, you're getting to a destination, but you can't see properly. By the grace of God, you make it, but the possibilities are that you are going to crash, right? Because you can't see properly. That is why filters can be very dangerous in the realms of communication, because we all have them. We were given filters. We talk again. I know you may think like, why do they always go back to the homes, right? In which we've grown up in, because we develop a lot of who we are as adults in those homes and in those experiences as we grow into young adults. And the filters are given to us, and we put them on. And when we are communicating and talking to one another, how I hear you comes through the lenses that I have on.
Now, you said we were given filters. What exactly do you mean? What are some of the filters that we have been given?
Well, an example of a filter perhaps that we've been given is the filter of judgmentalism. That could have been a filter, right? So whenever you try to come and share something with me, I always have this nugget in the back of my mind that you're trying to attack, or, this is, he's trying to, do something. It's like, no, I'm just trying to have a conversation with you. There are a lot of filters, that we're given. Give me some examples.
No, I mean, and this is just along the lines of what you phrase it as judgmentalism. I grew up in a hypercritical home. And so for me, it's difficult to listen to things that people are saying that are either an assessment or a critique on the way I've done something without feeling as though this person is negatively criticizing me. This person is putting down what I've done. This person is saying what I've done is not good enough. Right? And so I think that's a tremendous filter. The other one is if I have feelings of worthlessness, or rejection or no value, then these things become filters. And everything that I'm hearing through, you have no value, you're no good, So a conversation at work where I'm presenting a project or a plan before my coworkers, and they are asked to give feedback. I'm hearing the feedback through these filters that say that I'm worthless or the project that I've developed is no good. And so I easily can take offense to things that my coworkers say. And here's that self-talk again. I begin to talk about why they don't like me or why they think this, that, and the other. So there's all of these things that are taking place because of what you mentioned, or at least on one level, these filters.
When entering into relationship, you know, we talk to young couples or couples period, when they're getting ready to get married, it's so important that we are able to actually take those filters. First of all, acknowledge that you have them, right? And once you acknowledge that, be able to take those filters, and that takes trust. You know, trusting that the person that you're in relationship is not out to attack you, that they love you, you know, and so get rid of that self-talk, you know, that stuff that goes on in here, and be willing to accept that this communication isn't that, you know, give those, you know, filters back to who they belong to.
Yeah, and I think this is, you know, we're obviously Christians, coming from a biblical perspective.
Yes.
In order to experience what you just said, the only way that can actually take place is if we give those filters to Jesus. The scriptures tell us that God gives beauty for ashes, right? And the ashes may represent what I've experienced in my home, trauma and the like, that has caused me to be able to see and hear what is taking place in the present according to things that have transpired in my past. But God wants to have an exchange with us. And in the exchange, he'll give us a new way of seeing, a new way of seeing ourselves, a new way of seeing our spouses, a new way of seeing the world in which we live. And in exchange, he takes away the old way.
I like the scripture that talks about being a child, right? That when I was a child, I thought like a child, I talked like a child, you know, I moved, everything I did was childlike. But when I became a man or a woman, when I matured, that's the word we're looking for, maturity. When I put on maturity, I put away childish things. I remove the filters. I give them to God, and in exchange, he gives me a right way, right?
Yeah. And that's powerful, because my wife is not my mother. As her husband, I'm not her father. You know, our spouses are not the people necessary. They're not the people who hurt us in the past and in our childhood. And that doesn't mean we can't hurt each other right now. Certainly we can do that by the words we speak and the things that we say to one another. But it's completely unfair for me to treat my wife in this way based on the way that I was treated in my past. But we can't just smooth over that, because the only way to get that release is by going to God for that exchange. And we want to tell you this too: filters don't just come from trauma or negative experiences in our past. So just recently, because all filters are not negative or positive, some are just neutral. We had an experience where, you know, I was literally in the room, well, in and out. I was in the bathroom, getting dressed, doing all types of things. Right, physically present, but my mind, because of other responsibilities and other meetings and things like that, literally I was zoned out, and I could only remember about 3 or 4 things. But I was actually affirming and saying yes and no, and even asking questions. And then when my wife and I sat down a day or so later and began to kind of rehearse what we had gone over in that meeting, she was frustrated to the point of laughter, at least, at the fact that though I was present, because I had filters on, and some of those filters were, I assumed that nothing had changed, and therefore I don't need to listen to all the details. And because I don't need to listen to all the details, I can just pick out a couple of things that I'll check in on. But I was literally checked out the entirety, and it was about a 30 or 40 minute meeting. So that was a filter, and it wasn't because of trauma in my past or anything. I was just plain busy, and my mind is processing.
And the funny thing about that interaction was, because people react differently when that happens. And, you know, I had to take a minute to step back and think like, man, that's happened to me before. But in the midst of it, when you are trying to communicate and do these types of things, you know, I began to laugh because it was just so, I couldn't believe it. You know, and like you said, I saw you responding, you said nodding yes and no and talking. and yet you couldn't remember. And there are in some relationships when that would happen, people blow up, right? And they get angry, because they felt like the other person wasn't listening.
Or the other person, when they said they don't remember.
Yes.
You're lying.
Yes.
You said this, that, and the other.
Yes. And so that was really an eye-opening time for me. Not that we've never experienced it before, because I know it's happened to me before, where we've had conversations and I completely don't remember anything. But I think that it brought home the importance, one, of patience in the relationship, and understanding that there are things that happen during communication that we are not always aware that can affect it. For all intents and purposes, you were there. You intended to be there, you intended to be present, and you wanted to be a part of what was going on. But you also were dealing with stress. You were also dealing with other things that were happening around you that affect us while we're living real life. And so I think this is really a good example to bring up, because a lot of people's relationships go through a lot of rocky times when it comes to communication. If there's a lot of stress going on, I would say that you may want to consider the communication process being a little bit more lenient, right? Meaning, if you have a lot going on, voice that and say, you know what? I want to hear everything you have to say, but to be honest, I got a lot on my mind right now. Can we talk about this later? And I have to accept not to be offended by that. You know?
And that's a big thing, because a lot of, let's just be honest, a lot of us, we want to talk about what we want to talk about
right
when
now.
we want to talk about it. And if the other person is not willing or unwilling, then we take that as some sort of a jab at us, or we say, you don't love me. If you really loved me or you cared about this relationship, then you would talk about this right now. So we don't understand that actually that's a form of manipulation and control, right? Which is a tremendous roadblock to having or experiencing healthy communication or effective communication. So ultimately what we're saying is that there needs to be some sort of space that's given and time. And we need to be willing not to take it personally or to feel like, oh, this is undermining the relationship if you don't do it now. We need to actually check our manipulative and controlling elements.
Or unrealistic expectations.
That I need to talk about it. We need to do this right now. That doesn't mean that there's not important topics that you do need to discuss, but give one another the space and time. Why? Because the goal of communication, at least one of the goals, is to be understood. Right? And if I'm going to have a conversation, but based on the stress that my spouse is dealing with, or the context or the chaos that may be surrounding their lives outside of our marriage, I need to take into consideration that there's a possibility that though I want her to hear me, though she wants me to hear me, because of those external things, they simply may not be able to hear or understand us. And so we want to achieve that. Another, this is something that we can, a word of wisdom or advice that we can share as well. Sometimes you need to wait until you just get away. And that means you go on a vacation, you and your wife, you may go to wherever it is that you go, and work is not an issue, which means you're not rushed, right? There's no, okay, hurry up because I got an appointment I got to be to at such and such a time. But when there's time to just relax. You're away from everything else, and you can be engaged in one another.
It's funny because so many times in doing marriage counseling or talking with people, even in our own lives, there was a conversation that I had with someone, and there was something that was really heavy on their heart. Like, it was so heavy, and they were like, man, I need to share this right now. But it just so happened that during that time that their spouse was going through a loss, right? And so the heaviness in your heart, your spouse is heavy. And there are times when you got to take one for the team, right? So what does that mean? That means not that you won't be able to share what's on your heart, and that is not important. But at the time of loss and true pain that is going on in someone's life, whether it's the loss of a job or a loved one or stress, those different things. Again, getting back to being able to talk to yourself and have a rational and mature conversation. I tell people this is where you put your big girl drawers on or your big boy drawers on, right? And you say, listen, this is important, but this right now does not supersede the pain or the experiences that we're having right now. I will share this, but I will share it at a time once we make it over this hurdle, So I think it's so important to remember that it is important to share what's on your heart, but make sure you evaluate where you are and who you're, and let's talk about this too. The ways in which we choose to share our thoughts and our feelings. What am I talking about?
Yeah, well, before we go there, we'll get there right after we get this. And this brings us to this is a tremendous tool for your toolbox. And this is just piggybacking off what we mentioned in terms of where, when, the time, maybe vacation or something like that. We've discovered that there are teachable moments.
Oh, yes.
Teachable moments.
Yes.
So if I have something on my heart that I really want to share, and I really feel like this is going to be a benefit and a blessing to my spouse, and it's something that they need to hear to grow and whatnot. Sometimes what we need to do is we need to wait for teachable moments to be able to share that. What do I mean when I say teachable moments? Every moment when a child is in the classroom is not a teachable moment. True. For instance, if I tell the children, recess in 5 minutes. No, wait. Before you go to recess, I got to give you the 2 important words for your spelling test that you need to. What I just did is I'm trying to pack something that is extremely important into a time when their minds are somewhere else.
They're not ready for it.
This is not a teachable moment, right? So when are some teachable moments in relationships, Tamara?
One of the things that we found in our relationship from the very beginning, we've loved to read together. We've loved to sit down and read books about other people's problems, and we found that as we read about other people's problems or other people's struggles or even good things, right, that we are able to actually discuss those things openly. And it's at those moments where maybe something comes up and I say, wow, am I like that? Or, you'll say, oh, am I like that? And it's like the light bulb goes off. Ding.
This is a teachable moment. This is a teachable moment.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why this is true is because of a human principle. Mm-hmm. And the principle goes something like this. It's easier for us to see the complexities and brokenness and utter foolishness in someone else than it is for us to see it in ourselves. Mm-hmm. And so while reading or watching a documentary or movie or something like that, where we see this glaring character and it's just like, oh my goodness, that's horrible, man. If I was ever like that, I hope you would tell me. And it's like, well, babe, press pause on that. You are like that. And it's like, what? Now, here's the thing. Because my focus is on this characteristic in someone else, right? I can listen without being defensive, right? Yeah. So while the doors are wide open because I'm looking out at somebody else's stuff, then it's a perfect opportunity also for some inner reflection. Yeah. And because I've already recognized how broke and how jacked up this particular characteristic is, and I've already acknowledged that, man, I don't want this characteristic, then it makes it that much easier now for us to have the conversation. So we've discovered that, reading books, or maybe we're watching something together.
Watching videos, or it can be a myriad of things, as we interact with people. And listen, it's always easier, to identify something in someone else before you can identify it in yourself. So that is one tool I think that is very important to have in your relationship. Find something that you all can do together that helps you explore relationships, right? Mm-hmm. And the way that people do things, communicate, and deal with different aspects of that. Yeah,
we were encouraged when we got married to actually attend at least one marriage seminar every year. Yeah. And this couple had been married for decades.
Oh, yeah.
And it was an encouragement. You may not be able to attend a marriage retreat or a marriage seminar. We would encourage you to do that. Yeah. In fact, put that down on your list of expectations.
Yes, on your calendar.
This is one thing we're going to do, and that is we're going to invest in ourselves and in our marriage at least once a year. Yeah. And that is to find tools that you can continue to use to build your relationship and what have you. But once even if you're not able to do that, finding a good book or a series of videos that you can watch that are going to enhance your relationship, all of that would be wonderful.
And we're going to make sure that somewhere on our website you'll be able to find books and things that we found helpful for us, so you can go there and find some resources as well. So when trying to communicate, right, one of the things that we found over the years that may not be the best is if you struggle in the realms of communication, because as you just talked about, facial expression, body language, all of these things are involved in effective communication. Texting and emailing, because we can't see those things and we can't hear the tone of someone's voice, we can't necessarily see, what's happening, when they're expressing their thoughts. It may be better not to use that mode, especially if you struggle with communication.
Yeah, we can't tell you how many counseling sessions we've been in with couples where this has come up.
Yeah.
And they sent the text and look, I can show you the text. This is what they said. Well, I didn't mean it that way. Yeah. Well, no, you did. And just so much confusion that comes from that. And we've just come to realize that it's because of all of those other elements, the intonations of the voice, the facial expressions, the body language that are missing, that's a recipe to be mistaken and misinterpreted. And so when you have something important to share, that's generally not the best way to express it or to share it.
If you can, it's best to do face-to-face. If you cannot, you can do FaceTime. If you cannot, talk to one another, on the phone. So I think that's good.
Right. Now, there are levels of communication as well.
Yes.
The first level is the sharing of facts and information, explanation. How's the weather? How was your day? Right? That's level number one. What's the next level?
The next level is sharing your ideas and your opinions. This is who I'm going to vote for. This is what I feel about, the candidates, things like that.
Maybe you don't want to share that.
Maybe
if you want to keep it light, whatever. Now, the third level is moderate intimacy, and this where you share your own ideas and opinions about someone else's ideas and opinions. So you can share now, not only, I like this candidate, I like that candidate, but man, I don't like this candidate because of this, that, or the other.
Yes. Now, there is another one, which is sharing personal preferences, beliefs, concerns, our own personal experiences. So this is getting deep, right? Because we can be up here talking about other people, but when I actually start getting here talking about me and what I feel and what my thoughts are, what my personal beliefs are, that is going underneath the surface.
Yeah, and I think at this level, it is more than just sharing what my personal beliefs and thoughts and ideas are, but it's why I think that way.
Yeah.
So it's, hey, listen, when I was a little boy growing up in school, this, and this happened. And ever since that happened, I said I would never, or I said I always would, right? So that's one of the deeper levels of communication. And then finally, our inner feelings and preferences, likes and dislikes, where we open up about the inner life completely, right?
That's
and
deep.
we share not only this is where I was, or this is, something that happened in my past, but this is where I am now.
Yeah. So these levels of communication are important when you're beginning in the process of relationship, because it is natural to work your way through that. It won't always come in the very beginning. There is going to take time. And then we also tell people to be very careful. You don't want to have all of these levels with everyone.
That's right.
Right? So
That's
in a marriage, one of the things we try to make sure is we guard our relationship. And so I don't have the deepest level of communication with everyone that's in my life. This relationship is the most important. So there are certain things that my husband knows about me that are only for him to know about me.
There are also some different styles of communicators. Some different styles of communicators. What are some of these communication styles, Tamara?
There are quite a few. You have the passive, and you have the aggressive. You could have the passive aggressive, and there can be these mingling, of them. But we found that as we have been in our relationship, we have come across several ways of communicating that probably, sometimes work, oftentimes don't. One of them I'll tell you is the blamer. The blamer is someone who, when you're trying to communicate and share thoughts and feelings, it always is the other person, or is always someone else or something else,
Right. This is what makes this person a challenge is this is never a person who takes ownership or responsibility for the part that they have to play in something that goes awry. And so then there are also placaters.
Yes.
Placaters are always agreeable.
Yes.
So whatever you say, whatever you like, right. And these individuals they're passive, or they pretend or come off to be passive and helpless.
Yeah.
And no one wants an individual that's always agreeable, even though we may think we want someone that's always agreeable. And then there are people who are
the computers. Yes, these people generally deal with facts, right? They only want to hear the facts. They got proof. They only want to show you, things. Having actually meaningful conversations when you want to hear people's hearts generally doesn't take place with that person. They're the computer. They want, okay, how does this add up? And so it can be very difficult, because sometimes you want to connect with someone emotionally. You want them to hear you. You want them to be there with you. But generally, the computer is too in their brain, trying to add up everything that's being said rather than actually listening to what's being said.
And then there are those who are frenetic or distractors. The distractors act frenetic. It's always everything is the end of the world. Oh my goodness, and you can't really. You're like, hey, is everything okay? Is everything all right? But these individuals, they tend not to really say anything that's relevant, and they're here, there, and everywhere. Right, taking the conversation all over the place instead of right where it needs to be. Now, I want to say this, that there may be different types of communication styles.
Yes.
And there may be different types of communication that are relevant depending on what the situation is.
That's true.
If I take you to a Thai restaurant and there are a variety of different dishes that are on the menu, at the Thai restaurant, one of the utensils that they're going to give you is going to be a pair of what?
Chopsticks.
They're going to give you a pair of chopsticks, right? Because the chopsticks are what you use when you are eating this particular type of food.
Yeah.
But if you went to a restaurant that serves soup and they gave you some chopsticks, you'd be like, okay, what am I
supposed to do with this?
Right, what am I supposed to do with these? And so the type of communication that we use, it has to be measured to be useful and effective and healthy, depending on the context.
So would you say then, if you have a person who is trying to communicate and they're constantly aggressive, right? You have people like that who only operate in the aggressive mode. That would be kind of defeating when trying to have communication with people in their lives. Also with the person who is passive, when trying to have a serious conversation, when dealing with something that is very important, and they're very passive. You want to cut your leg off? Go ahead. It's up to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So we need to have an appropriate communication style for the setting, and that can be challenging, but we need to be open to learning how to communicate in different ways.
Matter of fact, I know that it is a necessity. It is a necessity, because what we think when we enter into a relationship, especially when you're single, you live with yourself, right? And maybe you live at home with your parents, but you go to your own room and you only have had to deal with yourself when it comes to certain things, right? You leave school, you don't have to worry about the teachers or the co-workers or whoever, But when you are married, when you're getting into a relationship, the amount of communication that you're going to have is going to increase. And so you have to build stamina, especially when you're not used to it. So your communication styles will shift, will change. We think we know ourselves in the beginning of our marriages, don't we? We think we know, I'm a good communicator, and you come to find out,
I'm a good listener.
Oh, I listen.
No, you don't.
Right.
And just, I think one of the last things that we'll say, or one other thing that we'll give, because maybe you heard us talking about communicating and whatnot, and even listening, and how important listening is. We want to share a skill with you that's a tool that can and should be used as frequently as possible.
Yes.
And that is reflective listening. Reflective listening. What does that mean? Oftentimes we may think that we are great listeners because we got two ears.
Yeah.
But as we talked about with filters and the communication styles based on the homes we grew up in, all of that is not necessarily the truth. Reflective listening gives us a tremendous opportunity not only to hear, but it gives an opportunity for our spouse that's communicating with us to have the satisfaction of knowing that they are being understood.
Yes.
Now, reflective listening involves what, Tamara?
It requires an exercise of being able to listen to someone share some thoughts with you. And then maybe midway through or at some point, you can stop the individual and you can say, okay, let me make sure that I heard what you said. This is what I heard you say. A, B, C, D. Is that true? Is that correct? And what that offers is, one, it offers you an opportunity to give clarity as to whether or not that is exactly what you said or if that's what you meant. Or you can affirm and say yes, so that my mind can then be free to continue to listen rather than trying to compute what it is that's being told to me.
Or decipher and interpret. And I think you bring out a very important point when, is this what you heard? And on that note, this is not the computer. Oh, you said this, and you said this.
Yeah.
What we're talking about when we mention reflective listening is not just listening for what a person says on the surface. We're actually talking about listening for a person's heart, right? Now, you might say, but you just told us that we can't read people's minds and we don't know what... No, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
But here's a biblical principle. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks.
Yes.
So there is a window into a person's mind or into a person's heart, their emotions, based on the things that we say, if we know how to listen attentively. So when we listen reflectively, while we're not just repeating verbatim what the person said, what we're doing is we're looking to attach feeling words to the things that they say. So this is what it would sound like. Tamara, I hear you saying that when you gave your presentation today, the response of some of your coworkers was extremely frustrating, right?
Yeah.
Or Tamara, what I hear you saying is that you were boiling mad because of the injustice that you saw. Or Tamara, what I hear you saying is that you were just flat out. You see what I'm doing? I'm attaching, these type of words to what I've heard her say.
And reflective listening isn't always dealing in negative. People want to be heard even in the positive when they're sharing their happiness and their joy, and they come home and say, guess what? This is what happened to me today. And sometimes we're like, and it's like, no, are you hearing me? Is this what I heard you say, that you really are excited, about this new promotion that you've gotten? Or, you can go through those things. So reflective listening isn't about positive or negative. It's about actually being involved in the process and affirming the individual that you are supposed to be listening to, that you actually hear them.
Right. And it's not a bad thing if a person says, well, no, not exactly.
Right.
That's not exactly what I was saying. I was more, but what it does is gives them an opportunity to correct and to say, well, this is more of what I meant. And then you can come back again. Okay, you didn't feel boiling mad or angry, or you're not actually excited. You're actually anxious, or whatever the case may be.
And reflective listening gives you an opportunity to build what we talked about earlier, which is the emotional vocabulary, right? Which is so important, and you will be the better for it.
Absolutely. So practice this.
Yeah.
It takes practice.
Yes.
And it means that we have to be actively involved in the listening experience.
Yeah.
Because listening is not a passive experience. It's not just, okay, let me put my phone away, let me sit down, hands on my lap, and let me stare at you for the next 15 minutes while you talk. Yes, I listened to everything you said. You said this, that, and the other.
Although I would recommend, when you're trying to have a good conversation, please don't look at your phone.
Absolutely.
Let's not.
Yes.
Stop.
Yes.
So, don't look at your phones. Don't be on your computers, because listen, while it may be possible for you to try to do multitasking when it comes to listening, it tends to backfire. It tends not to be healthy and good. So when it comes time to have a conversation, one that's really needed to have, go ahead and put those things away.
Yeah, and when we say put them away, don't put them on vibrate and sit it on the table. Yeah, I'm listening. Don't do that. What you can do is turn your phone off.
Yes.
It has a power button. You can turn it off and turn it back on.
Yes.
Turn it off, give 30 minutes, an hour, or however much you've agreed upon. That way, your attention can completely be with your spouse.
Yes. So important. So listen, guys, these are just a few things that have impacted our relationship, our marriage, and we wanted to share with you guys in the realms of communication. It's one of the most important things that is going to help your relationship to blossom and to grow. So do not neglect it. Watch this again over and over because some things will jump out to you that you missed before.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We'll see you next time.
All right. Take care.
Another thing that we want to share with you is something that's called assertiveness.
Yes.
Assertiveness means simply this. It doesn't mean you're going to do what I say when I say it, or, you know, that's not what we mean when we talk about assertiveness.
Yes.
Assertiveness is when we express what it is we want from the other partner.
Yes.
Now,
So
if
important.
If you've ever been in a disagreement, sometimes you make me sick or you make me so angry. All right. You told me that I make you sick, or you told me that I make you angry. But here's what you didn't do. You didn't tell me how I can adjust my behavior or how you would like me to adjust my behavior so that we're no longer at this impasse.
Yes.
So being assertive is like this, and we have to be specific when we're being assertive. You know, Tamara, when you were laughing at me, it really, really hurt my feelings. Yeah. And if you want me to really be attentive, and if you want me to pay attention to what it is that you have to say, then I would appreciate it if when we're talking, if you're not laughing at the things that I say. Yeah. Because when you do that, it causes me to have a response, and I tend to shut down, right? So did you get what I did? I didn't just say, you know, you make me sick, or you da-da-da, this, that, and the other. What I did is I specifically pointed to a behavior. It was her laughter at me in a conversation context. Yeah. And then I was explaining what my response to that is. Or here's another word. This is how I interpret that. And I didn't go into that, but I interpret that as a form of rejection. Yes. Or I think you're laughing at me, right? And it's very invalidating. And this is my response to that, right?
It is wrong for me to hold you accountable for something that I've never expressed to you that I need, right? Absolutely. And so if there's something that is important to me, I need to be able to express that to you and tell you that this is something that I need from you, rather than being angry with you because you have not given it or projected it or heard me in some, you know, or some realm. So we have to learn how to advocate. I have this conversation with so many people so often because they walk around with being angry and frustration. And it's like, well, did you tell the person? No, I didn't. Why not? Well, they should know. Please don't ever use that word. They should know is one of the most horrible comments that you can make in a functional relationship. No one will know unless you tell them.
Absolutely, absolutely. So assertiveness is a key tool in communication. Yeah. And what we mean by being assertive is to express not only what you want or how you feel, but express if it's necessary for your spouse to change his or her behavior. Express how you would like them to do that. You know, we gave an example of that.
And this goes back to your expectations, and you can then discuss whether or not it's possible, right? Oh, I'm sorry, I heard you, but I don't think I can do that. This is what I feel like I can do. Or you know what? Yes, I can do that. So it's affirming, and it helps you to be able to move
forward. I'm
forward.
not even conscious when I'm going there. I need you to remind me if it feels like I'm going there.
Yeah. So there you have it.